Hello, my dear friends. How are you? Welcome. Thank you for joining me here. I'm Ari Theriger, and today I would like to just have a little discussion here with you. And I'll be talking about 3 points in this order. First, monetizing the spiritual, followed by the misconception that within animism, the basic foundation of belief is that everything is alive. And finally, for us of the so-called Western society and societies who have replaced indigenous ways of life and perception towards the world with something else opposite to that, even if we are taking our shy steps towards animism again, as a collective, we won't be able to truly understand animism in the next 100 years, in the best case scenario, but hopefully not. I promise you these 3 points will eventually get together and form a comprehensible speech, at least I hope so. I have the key words in my head of what I want to address, and well, it is possible I might forget a few points along the way, but I would like to make a brief point here today with this video, and as always, your insight is appreciated, and thank you in advance. Very well. Let me jump straight to the point. Since I've become a YouTuber, and especially when addressing issues concerning spirituality in this channel, many people have come to me willing to pay so I can give spiritual advice, make rune readings, answer questions concerning the spiritual, the religious, and such. It's not very frequent nowadays because, well, very early on, I have explained my position several times, but from time to time, someone occasionally appears asking me for these issues, these things, and willing to give me money. As you know, I do have a patron. You asked me to do it, and I've done it because many of you wanted to help me, wanted to give me money, and indeed it has truly been life-saving, no doubt, because your monetary contributions not only have helped me to get more resources, to make a better and more detailed research and deliver the information on YouTube for free for anyone, but it also helps me to keep me alive by paying the bills and get food, just as we all need, right? So patrons' contributions are for research and to keep me alive. And that's it. I do not, and I repeat and underline this, I do not take money to give some advice or answer questions concerning the spiritual. I do that for free. When, of course, it is indeed within my knowledge and my power to help in such a way. Aside from the academic work, which needs, well, resources, every issue I have addressed in this channel concerning the spiritual, the religious, I have delivered the content for free. Every time I think some advice or perspective concerning such issues is needed, asked for, or wanted, I do a video and deliver it in here for free to whoever wants to listen to it. I do not, and I repeat and underline that I do not take money to do such things or to express some service concerning the spiritual. However, I'm not totally against that to some extent. I know there are a variety of people out there that take some small amount of money to do a tarot reading, casting the runes, give some spiritual advice, practical advice in terms of witchcraft or some other pragmatic behavior towards the spiritual, and so on and so forth. It's all right. Everyone has bills to pay and everyone wants to keep on living, obviously, and I see no harm in some people taking a little bit of extra money in exchange for helping the community to thrive in a spiritual manner and other ways. What I'm against is the capitalization on the spiritual, monetizing the spiritual, taking advantage of people's ignorance and despair and ask for huge amounts of money to teach the unteachable. I'm not even talking about, for instance, paying 3,000 euros or more for a course or workshop to learn how to spot elves in Iceland, and at the end of the day you have a certificate to add to your credentials so people can know you are an expert on spotting elves, but only spotting elves in Iceland. Elsewhere doesn't work. If you are paying 3,000 euros or more to learn on how to spot elves. You deserve to be scammed, really, because that's the dumbest shit you can spend your money on. Especially when people live a life with some considerable difficulties and yet you are spending money on absolutely nothing useful. Like the story of exchanging all your life savings for magic beans and then all the family dies of hunger. But anyway, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about, for instance, people who charge 2,000 euros or dollars or more to teach you Seidr, as an example, to teach you the unteachable, to tell you all the same words repeated like a record about ancestry and beating the drum and the ancestral ways of the European peoples, etc., etc. We white people love to hear so much, but it's repeated 19th century Romanticism, nationalist propaganda, which made it into neo-paganism and other new age religions, constructing fantasies and exotic lies to buy and sell the spiritual to the masses who hunger for an escapism from the traumas of Christianity. Paying 3,000 euros to 5,000 euros and dollars and whatever else you can give, and your time and your soul and your hours, so you can have a few days or a couple of weeks, if they are feeling generous, with some person that claims to know the ancestral ways of this and that, and can teach you on how to commune with the gods, the spirits, with your pissed off grandmother for good reason probably, and whatnot. I mean, have you noticed that now anyone can do a Reiki or however you spell it, a couple of sessions, level 3 wizard, and you are able to do a Reiki, charge crazy amounts of money, even doing Reiki from the distance. And some people charge over $2,000 to teach you the old Nordic ways or Celtic religion or the hidden secrets of something else that have been completely wiped out by Christianity, but somehow survive within that person's family and that person's family alone, whose ancestors somehow held on to the old ways, uncorrupted by the new religion, and now they can teach you all about it, provided, of course, that you sell your house and your car, so you can give them money to teach you about spirituality, to teach you the unteachable. And I mean, and why not? Before the capitalization of spirituality, the spiritual was already absolutely filled with people who wanted to get into the occult and magical arts, to aggrandize their power, to curse someone, to feel superior, to be better than anyone else, to take advantage of such knowledge no one else had access to, only them. All motivations to feed the ego and sell them to improve life and help to improve life and the experience of life for us all, or even for just the individual. And now with capitalism, people continue to be driven by ego, but also because there's a lot of money to be made from the spiritual, capitalizing the spiritual, because you have to spend money to make money. So spirituality has become a business. So people pay to take these courses and workshops on whatever is the new spiritual trend. So then they can profit from it eventually when they open their fancy little corner where people can lie on the grass and listen to the beating of the drum and channel all the energies and then the spiritual into your chakras. And lo and behold, you become the teacher and can profit from the same well of gibberish, feeding the desperate by vomiting the same words like a parrot on a loop. I mean, I took my first steps into paganism when I was 15. Before that, I was already seeking answers concerning the religious and the spiritual, having been raised a Catholic and under that boot of fear-mongering of all that religious madness of sin and eternal punishment and whatnot. I've been into the spiritual for almost 30 years of my life, and as you can imagine, I have met hundreds, if not indeed thousands of people claiming to do this and that in terms of the spiritual, that can teach you this and that and the absurd amounts of money they charge from people who are absolutely desperate for an answer and for something magical to lift them up and away from the traumatic misery of the religions we grew up with. And as a pagan, I've met many people in pagan circles and gatherings and such. As a YouTuber, I've met even more and lost count of all the people I've met and talked with and all the interviews and messages and all of that stuff. There's plenty of people who have been a great disappointment, obviously. Plenty who did not even surprise me at all with their hogwash nonsense. But what really gets into my nerves, as you can see, are people who make such a well-rehearsed show on social media networks, especially on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, with all this new age propaganda and charge ridiculous amounts of money to teach you the unteachable. And some of these people who say they have learned so much from me, and they too are against such charlatans and, oh, these rascals taking money to teach fantasies and lies and things they know nothing about, bastards. And then they go on and do the exact same thing. I mean, they are really not listening. No real contribution to make the world a better place, no real positive contribution to the community. Just greedy for money and to feed their ego. And I get it that we all must survive, but there are plenty of honest ways, and even within the spiritual, there's weight and measure for these things and the real positive contributions to the community. But this charging astronomical amounts of money to teach the unteachable, to feed lies, to repeat exotic crap, twisted to fit within the lost minds of the post-industrial white man, I mean, it's disgusting. And a couple of people have really recently greatly disappointed me. They truly aren't listening, despite saying they do. The time is perfect. My girlfriend just now sent me a video from TikTok, which basically sums up what I was saying up until this point and what I was driving at. Let me put the video here from a TikToker named Ouija Girl 1977. It's just under 3 minutes, and I think it's perfect and saves a lot of time. So if you please.
Spiritual narcissism is a plague on this community. Narcissists tend to thrive in spiritual spaces due to their, by and large, being a lack of accountability. People don't tend to take a critical eye to spiritual belief. And there are way too many people who don't use discernment. It will never cease to amaze me how people can be so blinded by a bit of flowery, esoteric language and somebody making wild claims with no basis for them. Here are some tips and tricks on how to avoid spiritual narcissists, both online and in the real world. First one is cosmic identity. It should go without saying, but narcissists really, really love to be above the average person. And they will often do that through choosing a role that places themselves at the apex, above humanity, above all else. So, giant red flag behavior there. The second one is cosmic mission. And that is when people think that the universe has assigned them a task that they must fulfill for the betterment of all humankind. When in reality, that's just feeding their ego. It's making them feel special and chosen. The third thing is when people have disdain for anyone who has not achieved certain milestones, like a spiritual awakening or something along those lines, or does not follow the particular set of rules that they live by. They will, normally say they're asleep or call them NPCs, but they have a general disdain that you can feel coming out of them when they talk about these people. It's almost as if they consider them inhuman. And the fourth, these people cannot help but brag about themselves continuously. They will call themselves humble. They will say that they don't have an ego, that they've transcended their ego, but they cannot help but talk about themselves as if they are the most special person who ever existed.
I have met thousands of people, and I can tell you only about, let's say, half a dozen were the real deal. And guess what? They did not charge people absurd amount of money. They do charge money, but not the absurd amounts of money, right? And didn't call themselves by any labels, don't call themselves by any title, like advertising being witches, volur, shamans, and whatnot. The community knows them. The community knows they can help, and people happily seek them out and give them something in exchange for the real help they give. Not this bullshit of paying 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 of any currency per person to participate in some workshop to teach you European ancestral spirituality. Spiritual narcissism is truly a plague upon this community of spirituality, of the spiritual, wherever. And in part, give thanks to Helena Blavatsky and such others like her, and that came after her as well, responsible for bringing into the our so-called Western societies complete, romantic, flourished, fantastical and exotic versions of Oriental spiritualities and religious practices, constructing appealing romantic ideas for the 19th century post-industrial Christian white man who seeks a lost identity. Thousands of years of religious and spiritual practices that took ages to develop, with all their disciplines, philosophies, and rituals whitewashed to look appealing to the Western society, borrowing hundreds of concepts to pass on as European ancestral religions and spiritualities, and eat that shit from a bucket with a spoon. Et voila, you are now a priest or a priestess, guiding your people in the ancestral ways of your forebears, and the real ancestral ways of your forebears are forgotten or put aside. Would that it were so simple. Lies upon lies deeply rooted in our Western society. Over 90% of what we think we know about the ancestral religions and belief systems of our European ancestors is all bullshit. The real thing, again, is forgotten or put aside. And worst of all, recent bullshit, actually, much of which concocted no more than 100 years ago, and much of it also since the 80s, the 1980s. There's plenty of this spiritual bullshit that was made up after I was already walking this earth, and I'm 37, as recent as that. And it's actually frightening how much so many will fervently fight to preserve the ways of their ancestors when they are fighting for concepts that did not even exist when their great-grandparents and grandparents were still around. Some of these concepts did not even exist when they themselves were already walking this earth. So many of these new age spiritual people laugh and point fingers and judge and find it cringe the church charging money for miracles, capitalizing the religious, monetizing the spiritual, and they do the exact same thing. I'm absolutely tired of this type of spirituality, which seems to be what we have the most these days. This is one of the greatest reasons why I have progressively abandoned the spiritual years ago, before I even became a YouTuber. And I don't want to be part of any community, any group, any religious path of a religious organization. I don't want to advertise your products. As I said here many times before, I do not follow any path but my own. The spiritual for me is in here, and the experiences I have in the waking world and in the observance of the world and genuine interactions with others, not in paying and selling the spiritual and workshops on the spiritual. We live on an era of our societies so used to buy and sell stuff at our fingertips through a quick search on the internet, and we have everything delivered at home. Everything disposable and you just buy more of the stuff. That we have transported this mentality into the spiritual. Almost everyone that enters in spirituality is always with this hunger to make it all very quickly and thinking about, or already thinking about the best way to earn money from the spiritual. I mean, it's not just disgusting and infuriating or frustrating. I think it's a lot more disappointing than anything else. And this is one of the great reasons why most people, we as a collective, will never truly understand animism. That's what I'm also driving at. Understand animism again. Now that this movement is on the rise again and a trend, an understandable trend, mind you, following the increasingly devastating mark we humans leave on the planet and the harmful impact upon nature and its persons. And people ever more understandably wanting to connect with nature as again, an understandable escape from this dystopian metal and glass and cement maze we call civilization. As I said here many times before, I truly believe that a more animistic way, a more indigenous way of perceiving the world and life is truly the key to save this world and prepare a better future for this whole planet and its persons and our descendants. But the capitalization of the spiritual and the whitewash of ancestral spiritualities will not help us as a collective society to truly understand the spiritual, to truly experience it, and as such, truly understand animism. So let me now jump to a very common misconception concerning animism. From time to time, there comes a statement that seems like an indisputable truth, and I get those affirmations here sometimes in this channel in the comments. In fact, part of the reason I'm doing this video is precisely because of a recent comment from a person who completely disagrees with everything I've been saying concerning animism, and among many common misconceptions that person has written in the comments, has also professed this one, that animism is the belief that everything is alive. Well, this is indeed a common misconception and not surprising at all. And it's not just a quick search on Google concerning animism to be explained, and the very first thing, the very first understanding that appears in the search is this, that everything is alive. But also in scientific works, in academia, until quite recently actually, this is something that always comes up as some sort of universal law concerning animism, that it is the belief that everything is alive. And I will not be surprised if I said the exact same thing some years ago. I don't remember, but I wouldn't be surprised. Well then, this idea achieved a general consensus among the scientific community through 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries psychology and anthropological studies towards indigenous peoples. This is something I've talked about in this channel before on another video. These studies conducted by us Europeans in a time period when the colonial mechanics were still very much alive and part of the foundations of what is understood or what constitutes civilization. So these studies would start from the preconceived ideas that indigenous peoples and all others that did not fall under the parameters of the civilized not only were savages, but they themselves and their beliefs were childish and primitive. So animism wasn't just seen as childish and primitive, but an opposition to the civilized and sophisticated European philosophies on the spiritual and the religious, and that primitive peoples saw faces everywhere and gave identity to everything, absolutely everything. It's from this that the common misconception here spoken derives from, that animism is the belief that everything is alive. This is the perception of animism from the misinterpretation of such beliefs by the European colonial mind. And take this from a man who is very much aware of the colonial horrors of his country, of the past, obviously, and how the people of the past and probably some of my ancestors have directly contributed to change the world forever with their unfortunately very successful colonization efforts and slavery. And no, this is not white guilt, this is the truth, and there's no point in trying to sugarcoat it because the historical truth is there. The historical truth of the past is fucking horrible. Anyway, luckily for us nowadays, there's been a real effort to understand animism and decent and proper scientific work on the matter, as well as, and this is very important, indigenous peoples and people whose upbringing has been within animistic societies, indigenous societies, have progressively entered the scientific, the academic world, and have greatly contributed to a better understanding of animism, or to the understanding of this multiplicity of beliefs we call animism. As I said here before, animism is highly rational. And you can watch my videos, my previous videos on animism in a proper folder in this channel concerning that, which I think I've named it Animism and Shamanism. But as I was saying, when we look upon indigenous societies and societies in which animism is a recurrent perception of the world and behaving towards the world and life within that perception, that lifestyle, we notice that only the adults are the animists. Children are not animists. And in fact, animism is taught to children by the adults who are animists. I have addressed this point on a previous video about children not being natural animists, and that animism is something that people learn and not something that is inherent to human nature. This idea, another common misconception, that children are naturally born animists, also comes from the same minds and same perception, as spoken previously, that created the common misconception of the belief that everything is alive in animism in the first place. Animistic societies were seen as primitive and savage, and their beliefs as childish, and the inability to grow past and evolve from childhood fantasies and wonder. It was perceived by these early pseudoscientists that animists displayed the same behavior as children, giving life and personality and identity to objects, namely, as children often do, a personal and favorite object, especially a toy, being a child's friend, and children talk to the toys and seem to give them personhood, and indeed give them personhood to a certain extent. This same behavior, natural to children, was transported to the biased, arrogant, and pretentious observance of these scientists towards indigenous persons and indigenous animistic societies. It was concluded that animists were just like children, and not only believed that everything was alive, but they also gave personhood and saw spirits in everything, and therefore children, like animists, were animists too, in the sense of having a mind incapable of yet perceiving reality. Children are not natural animists. Animism is taught, and only adults are animists, as I've explained in more detail in that previous video. Just because a child has a favorite toy and gives personhood to it, that isn't animism. That is a child giving personhood to an object. That is a child transporting emotions, transporting sentiment, feelings, and projecting them onto the toy, projecting emotion towards an object. In the best case scenario, that is in part similar to the basis of what can potentially become a talisman. A talisman is a magical object charged with the emotion a person gives to it, and the person can give it personhood eventually. From the moment an object ceases to be used for its original purpose, and the purpose becomes a desire to project a need or an objective towards the spiritual, that object ceases to be what it is and becomes a talisman, a charm, a magical object, something else, which can be given personhood, and the more we use it and the more we charge it with our emotions and purposes, it may eventually contain a spirit at some point through ritual, even part of your own spirit. But that's something else here spoken before. A child's favorite toy and the child behaving towards the toy as if it were a person doesn't necessarily mean that the child is creating a talisman, right? It's just a similar behavior in its basic form. And certainly doesn't mean that the child is animist because it is giving identity to a toy. Animism isn't about believing that everything is alive. Animism is, in fact, the ability to detect life, spirit, consciousness, identity, personhood, sentience. It's like that wonderful phrase that, in a nutshell, helps to explain animism a bit. Not all rocks are alive, but some are. It's easy for a human to detect life when there's clear movement, form of speech, sound, behavior, interaction, a display of consciousness, sentience of some sort. The less presentation or expression of these factors there are, the more difficult it becomes for a human to detect sentience, let alone spirit. Animism is not about believing that everything is alive, because it's not about projecting one's emotions into something and automatically that something becomes alive. We do not give life to something through the ways we feel towards something. Animism is the ability to detect life, to detect spirit. And that is learned, which is why adults are animists and not children. This is one of the reasons why animism is highly rational, because it's not about the projection of one's emotions and emotions dictating what reality is. It's about detecting actual life, actual spirit. So no, animism isn't the belief that everything is alive. Animism is taught and learned on how to detect life and where. And we, in our so-called Western societies, it's wonderful that many are turning to animism, and there's hope knowing that animism can be taught. However, we are not there yet at the point where we truly understand animism. I include myself in this. It has been some long years of study and certainly wonderful improvement, but there are so many gaps and still quite a lot of a lack of understanding actual animism in many points. You and I, unfortunately, we are not going to see a world in which our societies have become animistic again, or at the very least with a better understanding of animism to the point of making actual visible differences in the collective. We, collectively speaking, we are not there yet. Certainly, some people will get there because we do need teachers on this matter, and be careful who is out there wanting to teach you and giving workshops on animism and whatnot, especially people on our so-called Western societies. We are not there yet, as I said, so there are quite a lot of people, certainly, that will try to teach you all about animism, but they haven't reached that point and will just feed you the same lies and the same fantasies as spoken previously in this video. Let's move on. As I was saying, we do need teachers on this matter, but as a collective, we are not there yet, and it will take a long walk to achieve a collective understanding of animism. And we should listen a lot more to indigenous peoples, right? But we are taking those steps so that future generations can thrive from this. And at the same time, we are in a wonderful moment of discovery or rediscovery, discovery mostly. And the more we delve into animism, the more we learn, And the more we understand, there's much we don't yet know, but it's a constant path of learning and be amazed with each piece of information we finally understand, and how this is changing our brains and the way we behave and perceive things. So it's constantly magical, and that's wonderful, I think. But the progress is of truly understanding animism is slow, and will be even more slow because of the monetization of the spiritual, because of the capitalization of the spiritual, and these new age gurus and spiritual narcissists, which on top of scamming people and not actively contributing to a positive evolution in terms of the spiritual in the collective experience of life, they are actively contributing to maintain spiritual ignorance, because they thrive and earn their life by maintaining people in ignorance, and are not allowing people as such to truly understand animism for as long as the collective is bound to spiritual fantasies to feed the ego and to feed our desire to escape life and escape reality. We need to face reality and apply an animistic understanding of life to life itself. Apply an indigenous way of life in order to better reality itself and make this world and life more habitable and more pleasant for us all. Life and spirit are certainly not just in what can immediately be perceived by the most basic senses. There's life and spirit beyond that, but we must learn to detect that in order to better appreciate the wonders of life and of existence itself. And I truly hope this video was useful and the message came across as clear as possible. No worries, I won't charge anything. A very special thanks to my patrons who contribute, or whose contributions help me to deliver information for free to everyone here on this platform. Thank you, my dear friends. Thank you all for watching and for listening. My dear friends, as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again.